"54-year-old James Hunter has been missing for 4 years, vanishing in the central west of New South Wales, Australia. James is described as Caucasian, about 175 centimeters tall, with brown hair and eyes, and a medium build. James is the son of famous award-winning Australian actor Bill Hunter, who died in 2011. Bill was in movies like Gallipoli, Muriel's Wedding, The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and Finding Nemo. It's also believed James had hurt his hand before going missing and recently had surgery on it, which required physiotherapy. James was last seen at a pharmacy in Dubbo in February 2020 and has not accessed his bank account since then. His blue 2005 Toyota Hilux was found on a property in Mendooran in March 2022, adding a layer to the mystery of his disappearance. Despite extensive investigations and searches, he has not yet been located. He was apparently in the area for work, heading to Lightning Ridge to mine for opals. Hunter's family and police are concerned for his welfare and are appealing to the public for any information. A company called Working Drones Australia has taken tens of thousands of images of an area where they think James may have gone missing. James's family and friends urgently need your help combing through these high-resolution images, which are now available online. If you can spare some time, please consider assisting. I've linked the images in the show notes, and you can also find them on the Help Find James Hunter Facebook page. James's friends and family have also started a GoFundMe, which I have also linked in the description. In part 1, I spoke with Murie and Chloe. Murie is James's ex-partner, and Chloe is Murie's daughter. I also spoke to Daniel Wood, the chief remote working pilot at Working Drones Australia, who's helping in the search for James. It is crucial that anyone with relevant information come forward. Anything you know could be key to finding James, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem. If you have something to share, please get in touch with the Dubbo Police Station at 02-6883-1599, or you can call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-333-000. Well, why don't we start with something pretty easy then? Why don't you both tell me, or one of you tell me how you know James, what's your relationship with him, that sort of thing.
I met James when I was around 19. We had a relationship and lived together for many years. He raised Chloe. There would be many people out there that didn't know that she wasn't his biological daughter. He just never fought it in that way at all. He has maintained a relationship with her and I ever since we separated, which was many years ago. And we have just been really good mates ever since then, and I could always rely on him for whatever we needed, and so could Chloe. And he was just someone that was just always close to us, and Chloe considers him to be her dad at the end of the day.
Yeah, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, basically he just raised me from when I was young, and we just always maintained a relationship up until I was an adult. So that's how I know him.
For people who don't know James, what's he like? What's his personality like? What stands out? Either if it's his personality traits or physical characteristic, what would you notice if someone was to first meet him?
He's loud, abrupt, I would say, but he's also really nice, and he always would make an effort to talk to people and say hello to everyone, when he was at the pub or wherever he went.
He was kind of the life of the party. People were drawn to James, and I call him Jamis. We don't call him James, we call him Jamis. People are drawn to him. He's larger than life. He's got so much energy that you can't help but notice him. He's extremely funny. He's highly intelligent, seems to know people wherever he goes. You always knew where you stood with him, and there was no grey in James's world. It was either black or white, and he was pretty straight down the line. There seems to be, and this is really out of character for him.
Yeah, it sounds like it's very out of character. What do we know about his disappearance? I think I read he was last seen by family in Newcastle, and I think it was December of 2019, and then sometime seen at a pharmacy near Dubbo in February of 2020. Can you tell me a little bit about what you know about that?
I started to worry something was wrong at the start of COVID when we didn't really hear from him. But we honestly thought he was just off doing his own thing. Yes, he was last seen at a pharmacy in Dubbo on CCTV. That's about all we know. We know that he left his car in Mendooran. We don't know why he left his car in Mendooran, but that's where it is. Mendooran's about 75 kilometres from Dubbo. It is a small country town. It's a farming town. Sheep, cattle, has a population of about 300, I think. And that's about all we know. I didn't speak to James probably for about 18 months prior to him going missing, and that was normal sometimes for us. But he wasn't reported missing until July 21. So for 18 months after that last sighting.
Your last conversation with him, did you notice anything off about him, or was he his regular self? Like, do you remember kind of what his demeanor was like?
Our last conversation was fairly normal to some conversations that we had sometimes. We didn't have a good conversation the last time I spoke to him. He was his normal self. I know that he hasn't just walked off the face of the earth, but I just don't know what's happened. James mined for opals in Lightning Ridge, and he pretty much had his hand in all different things.
When he went missing, he was working as a farmhand on a property out at Mendooran, doing farm work.
And that's where his truck was found, right?
Yeah.
What does the property the truck was found on? Do you know what the owner of that property said? Like, he was obviously maybe there for work. Like, was there any clues from that owner about why his truck was there and James wasn't?
No, not really. I spoke to the owner of the property fairly early on, once we found out he was missing. They didn't really give me too much clues. They just said that he just walked off and they didn't see him again. But they didn't really say much other than that.
Was he pretty good? I'm imagining, I haven't been to Australia, but from what I've heard and what I've seen, I think if you're going to work outdoors, you have to be smart and you have to know what you're doing. Like, it sounds like James was very capable when working outside, especially if he's doing mining, right?
He was definitely capable of living off the grid for a long period of time if he needed to.
Have you lost touch with him before? Like, has he gone off the grid for work or otherwise and then come back? Has that happened previously?
Yeah, it was pretty normal for him to do that. So that's why, we just kind of would wait for him to contact. He never really had, a one phone number that you could contact him on. He'd have one number for maybe a year or so, and then he'd lose his phone and then change it. And, it was pretty normal for him to go through long periods of time without communication.
So is that why it took a little longer to report him missing? Just everyone kind of assumed that he was off working or doing his own thing?
Yeah. And I think everyone kind of just assumes that he's in contact with somebody else, that's what was normal for him. If someone wasn't talking to him, another friend was. So once I, kind of started contacting all his friends and realising that no one had spoken to him in, quite some time, it was, that something was up.
Do you know who the last person was to speak with him?
No, we don't exactly know the last time he was spoken to by somebody.
And you don't know if he was in maybe any sort of trouble? Was he one to get into trouble with other people, or did he mostly keep to himself?
The possibility was there that he could have got into trouble with people, but he usually knew how to handle himself most of the time, so it wasn't an issue. But, obviously sometimes there could be things that have gone wrong, so we'll never know at this point. We're hoping that the police can give us some answers.
Yeah, it was going to be my next question. I was kind of reading online about some of the drone searches and some of the ways police were searching. What's your interaction been like with the police? Do you think they've been searching pretty hard for James, or what's been your experience, both of yours?
Well, for me, I for the first 12 months, I didn't really speak to the detectives at all, just purely because I was incapable of doing that at that time. But since then, I speak to them every week. They are pretty good. I organised the drone search myself and asked the New South Wales Police to work with me for that search, which they kindly agreed, because at the end of the day, that search was going ahead with or without them. I just really wasn't sure where. My gut told me Mendooran, but I just didn't know exactly where out there. So the police have worked with them and did that search. There are 33,000 images. They have been handed back over to the police. They were handed back over about 4 weeks ago, I think, roughly, and I'm just now waiting for them to be released for online. It's a bit overwhelming, so this will change the way missing persons in Australia is done, I guess. So the AI for these drone searches, these LiDAR drone searches, is absolutely overwhelming. So that's something that I've always really had to get our head around as well. And once they're uploaded, the public will see that. Just the scale of the images and the clarity of them are absolutely insane, and they're just taken from so far in the air. So I guess now we're just waiting back to hear from the detectives, which we'll speak to again tomorrow because it's a public holiday here today, so I normally try and talk to them on a Monday. But I also feel that me being proactive and contacting them all the time keeps James's case alive. It is very active, though, they tell me, but I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it sounds like this is, obviously been very difficult on both of you, and I imagine it's got to be difficult to get up every day and to have this looming over you. Like, what's been the impact on both of you?
Well, for me, it literally knocked me knocked me down, really. It took the wind out of me for a long time. I probably lost a whole year. My relationships with everyone, I guess, has changed. Unfortunately, this is something that I can't get out of my head, like when somebody dies, you know what's happened to them. But when someone goes missing, you just wonder all the time where they are, and you tell yourself so many different things. It's like to me, it's been like a roller coaster ride that I can't get off, really.
Well, I was going to say, I don't think it helps to, like, have the police or anyone indicated to you any leads on what they think may have happened to James, or is everyone baffled by his disappearance?
No one will talk.
I don't think the police can really give us too much information until they've crossed all the bases. They've said to us that they assume that there may be foul play, but they can't guarantee. There's no guarantees because at this point we don't really have any knowledge of leads. That's all on the police. They don't give us that information until they're allowed to. They have to speak to a coroner and get permission to release certain evidence to families.
Chloe, are there any theories or any thoughts that you've had, like based on maybe some of your own research or anything that you've heard, or are you basically just relying and hoping that the police solve this at some point?
I've done my own research at the start and did as much as I can. It took the police a long time to follow up on kind of all those leads that I'd worked on because I did it all on my own accord. So they had to follow up and contact a lot of different people. So I feel like it's taken them a long time to act on some of these things. But that's just, I guess, what they're doing, what they can with the resources that they have. In being in such a small town, there's not that many police officers and detectives employed there. So, yeah, nothing gets done as quick as the more serious cases.
I just think the reality of missing persons here is, especially long-term missing people, is when something else comes in, they just get pushed further to the bottom.
That's my experience from a lot of these cases as well. I think the public can help though with these, and I stumbled across James's case just on Facebook, which shows you the power of social media. And I'm wondering, like, if you could ask the public, people listening, for help, like what would you ask for from them? What can we do to help you?
share the page, share your podcast, and just anybody that knows even the smallest thing, like Janice would have been expected to be somewhere. Someone would have been waiting for him. There has to be someone. There has to be a girl, something. Somebody knows something. I know I'm James's ex-partner, but I'm not the enemy. We're not the enemy. We just need to know what's happened to him.
And if anyone does know anything, who should they contact? Is there a person that's in charge of James's case? Is there someone people should get in touch with?
They can contact Dubbo Police, and I can get you that phone number. And they can also contact Crime Stoppers here in Australia. Or they can contact me or Chloe directly, you know, if they wanted to. That's not a drama either. And nothing that Janice would do would surprise us. We just need to know where he is and get him brought home, really, at the end of the day, because he would never let this go on. There's just no way he would let this go on. He would have put a stop to it the minute his picture was out.
Is there anything that I didn't ask or anything you want to share about James or anything at all that you want me to include in the podcast that I haven't brought up yet?
Just that he was, I guess, kind and caring, and he was very protective of those that he loved, and he would do anything for those he loved, and I just know that he wouldn't be out there just wanting to be missing, because he wouldn't put Chloe or myself through this. I just know he wouldn't. I know that deep down he just wouldn't do that to us or the grandkids at the end of the day. Like, he just wouldn't.
Yeah, he was always like one to show up whenever he was needed, like, and I could always contact him like within like a couple of hours. He would contact me back no matter what. Just the fact that he hasn't contacted means that something like has gone wrong, or, you know, something's happened, because I would have heard from him by now.
Like, he'd come and visit and the whole world would stop. No one would go to work. The kids wouldn't go to school. It would just be Janice time, you know, and that's just how it was when he turned up. He'd come and stay with us. As I said, he was very fun, and the kids absolutely loved when he turned up, because they just knew that they were going to have an amazing adventure while he was here. He was the kind of pop that didn't say no.
After initially recording with Murie and Chloe, Murie wanted to share some more thoughts about James, which I've included here. So I noticed on Facebook you've shared quite a bit about how James's disappearance has impacted you. I'm wondering if you're okay maybe sharing some of those thoughts and things that you've posted with me.
Yeah, sure. One I put up is I have no idea how or why any of this has happened. What I do know, it has literally turned our world upside down. There are other people that know Jamis, and they know him well and will be way more aware of his movements. The people he last had any interactions with in the last few years, friends, acquaintances, a girl, I need you to let us know what you may know. It's time. It really is. Jamis is not here. I'm Jamis's ex-partner, and I have remained connected with him, obviously, because of Chloe. We were more than mates. He bossed me, guided me, and annoyed me at times. But he also loved us as much as we did him. We'd often joke with Jamis about the way he and I would play nice and then maybe not so nice. He would stay while he was visiting with us. Jamis and I have been through many things, but no matter what, he has always been there for us. He's dropped everything when we needed him. I know how many times he said, if I go missing, don't look, I'd not be happy. Rah, rah, rah. I've also discussed, should I be doing this? But we had a deal, and that has not been met. And as a few of his long-time friends have said, nobody else is. The last time I spoke to him, he mentioned the missing thing. I flipped my lid as usual, and we were both extremely wild, and one of us hung up. I knew it would be a while until Jamis calmed down. As some would be aware of already, Jamis would and has done so much for us over the years, and I would do pretty much anything for Jamis. I know he'd be fuming wild, but my gut is telling me to keep going. I have a lot of respect for Jamis, and in this way, some would think I'm being disrespectful to him, but I know that this is not being disrespectful, and I know how he would feel. I spent many hours pondering, should I not? But I'd be disrespecting him much more knowing he has not contacted anyone to stop any of this. Jamis has his own voice, and I'm the last person he'd want to speak on his behalf ever.
Daniel Wood is the chief remote pilot at Working Drones Australia, a leading provider of advanced drone services across the country. Daniel's company has been working to help find answers to what may have happened to James. They've flown drones in the area where they think James might have been, taking tens of thousands of high-resolution photos. When I recorded this interview with Daniel, it was before they released the drone photos to the public, so some of this discussion may seem a little dated, but it's still very important. The photos are now online. You can find them in the show notes as well as on the Help Find James Hunter Facebook page, and James's friends and family need help combing through them. A good starting place, and I didn't put this in the questions, but it kind of seems like a natural warm-up, is just to kind of, for you to maybe tell me about, in general, like what you do at Working Drones Australia, what the company does, that sort of thing. Give me a bit of an overview, if you will.
Yeah, sure. So probably the best place to start when talking about Working Drones Australia is really, why did it come about in the first place? So my background is in criminology and cybersecurity, which is a fair distance from drones, but I was involved in a lot of sort of digital digital forensics, if you will, searches for missing persons, as well as obviously my standard day-to-day cybersecurity work. And I guess I was getting a little frustrated with getting to like the last known digital locations of persons. So you'd track them through, walking along with telephone towers, or you may see them on CCTV, or a Google location search might put them in a particular location. But that's kind of as far as you'd get. And if you wanted to go any further, you pretty much had to go drive over there and have a look. And so I started really looking at technology that could do what I'm sort of terming that last mile, if you will. So going from that last digital footprint to where could they be? If the digital footprint was going into a particular suburb or a particular area of bush, being able to actually look into that bush and explore it. And so I started looking at drone capabilities and what was possible. And, I've told this story a few times, but it was really the cost of that type of technology was such that I needed to make it a commercial endeavour. So that's pretty much what we did. So we started Commercial Drones, or I started Commercial Drones Australia with a view to doing commercial work, but all the technology we purchased had a dual usage. It was able to be used for missing person searches and other community-related activities, as well as having a high-value commercial offering. And so that's really how Working Drones Australia started. And now we work all over Australia, predominantly the East Coast, from sort of Tasmania all the way up to Queensland. Have a few staff and a few contractors, and really looking to keep expanding.
How did you come across James Hunter's disappearance? Like, can you walk me through that? And what you can share. I know there might be some details you might have to omit, but I'm just curious. Did you know James before? Was it kind of brand new when you like the case when you heard about it? Just tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think first off, I didn't know James, and I rarely know. Well, I don't think I've ever known anyone I've looked for, to be honest. How we sort of select who we can assist might sound a little bit cold, but there's only certain things that we can do with the technology we have is really the short answer. So there's some people who are better candidates for us searching than others. And given, we do about 10 to 15 per year, and it was a case of, James is missing in a particular location, and that location was readily, surveillable from the air. and certain factors that led into him being an ideal candidate, I guess. And as far as the initial engagement, I don't really know. I expect Murie probably messaged me. That's typically what happens. The families will message me. But I tend to keep an eye out as well. Like I'm on quite a number of sort of social media missing persons pages. So if I see a case that's, particularly close to home is obviously easy. But if there's something that I know that we can definitely assist with, then I tend to have that in my mind and thinking about it and thinking about the circumstances. And again, the technology we have. And then, Murie would have reached out and it would have sort of gone from there.
One of the things that I, trying to understand better is the area. I know it's a pretty large area that James went missing in. But from what I've gathered from reading about it, looking at pictures online, not being in Australia myself, it looks pretty remote. And I mean, maybe not remote for Australia, but when I look at it, it looks remote. I'm wondering, can you maybe describe the area geographically a little bit that you've been searching for James in, and maybe some of the challenges you face in terrain like that?
To be honest, it's not particularly challenging terrain for us. From a commercial offering, we specialise in remote and rural. And in Australia, it is very remote and very rural, let's say. So we've got equipment that allows us to stay in place. We've got Starlink, we've got, generators, extremely large battery sets. So we can go multiple days without, any sort of external assistance, I guess. The area let me first start, I guess, with where is James missing from? And the short answer is we don't know. What we do know is that there are breadcrumbs along the way, and one of those breadcrumbs is a location he used to work at. One of the ways we select families that we can assist is that they have a general idea of where to search. We're really limited to about 50 square kilometres from an aerial search perspective before it really goes beyond what's possible with remote drones and you start to get into manned aircraft, helicopters and the like. So we had a number of things that led us to the property in question, and the property's probably about 7 hours from us in Canberra, probably about 3 or 4 hours from Sydney. So it is starting to get what we would consider outback, but you've probably still got another 5 hours or so before you'd be truly outback. The property itself, where we were doing the searches, I think we covered about 1,200 hectares, and we did that over, 3 days. And it was largely farmland, so quite a lot of cropping that was sort of turned over regularly. But it did have portions of brush and sort of an ironbark, which is a very common tree in Australia, that was readily sort of able to see the ground from the air through that sort of trees. It wasn't very thick, so allowed us to cover a lot of ground quite quickly.
Is this in the Lightning Ridge region, Mendooran or Dubbo? Like I've heard all these places and kind of been looking them up, and I know James has kind of been seen in all of these places potentially. So I'm just curious, is the majority of your search happening in Lightning Ridge then?
No, so when we select locations to search, I guess we do what's called speculative search analysis. So we look at sort of creating hypotheses that may or may not be true, and that's sort of where the term speculative search comes from. And then once we've come up with some sort of hypotheses, and they can be very strange hypotheses, it could be you got hit by a car and someone dragged him into the bush. It could be, a bunch of bikies came around and not necessarily in James's case, but in other cases as well, beat him up and left him for dead, or, someone had a heart attack in a field. So we look at all these just pure speculation, not related necessarily to facts of the case themselves. And then we come up with a method of, out of all these things we've speculated, how many of them, given the technology we have, can we address? And most of the time we can address quite a number, but there are some things that we, just aren't possible with the technology we have. So one of the site selection was really driven by information about where his phone was last located or pinging a tower, as well as where his motor vehicle was. And so that was a property in a town called Mendooran. It was about 20 minutes out of Mendooran, which is on the way to Lightning Ridge from Sydney, but it's sort of halfway. So it's probably still a 4-hour drive to Lightning Ridge from Mendooran. And Lightning Ridge is what we would consider outback, I guess.
Okay, that makes sense, because that's where his truck was found, I believe, right? The blue Hilux that he had, the blue pickup?
Yeah, the blue Hilux was at
Hilux,
Mendooran,
sorry,
on the farm, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Can you tell me a little bit about what an actual drone search looks like? And, I know you probably can't get into too much specificity in terms of the search for James, but if you can, that would be great, just to give the listener a sense of, like, you show up on site, what do you do? How do you go about searching, swaths of land that are in this area?
Yeah, so the first thing is selecting the technology. So obviously in James's case, this information may not be relevant, but available to us, we have remote survey boats. So they'll go on sort of water bodies with underwater sonar, as well as echo sounders and the like. We have magnetometers, so similar sort of thing. We can look for metallic objects if we're looking for vehicles or similar. We've got LiDAR, so we're able to look for buildings or potential hideouts or depressions where persons may have, fallen down a hole or similar. And then the technology, I guess, selected in James Hunter's case is photogrammetry. And so photogrammetry really is just taking as many photos as you can, such that we can run them through machine learning to look for, pretty much anything from human remains and bones and the like. But we can also do cloth, backpack, shoes, the standard sort of things you would have on you, and potentially if you perished in a paddock, we would be able to detect from the air. So as far as what do we do, so once we've selected a technology that we're going to use, and sometimes we do multiple technologies, we then pre-plan it in our mission planning software, and that allows us to really understand how we can best utilise our time from an efficiency point of view, as well as understand how much technology we need to bring. Do we need to bring additional generators, etc. And then really it's just like mowing the lawn. You just go up and back taking aerial photos, and then we run it, like I said, through machine learning after that.
And you, I think relatively recently, from what Murie was kind of hinting at and telling me, did a large search and I imagine you probably take tens of thousands of photos in any given search? Yeah,
look, it depends on the size, obviously, but we generally expect between 20 and 40,000 images.
Wow. So I would assume at this point, are you at the process yet of going through those photos and kind of seeing if there are any leads or clues that you can find?
Yeah, so we have been through them, particularly with machine learning. We've obviously stitched them together and created like a high resolution, essentially what you would see with Google Earth as well. And that allows us to sort of look around the area and identify things that might be of interest to the police, for example, as well as obviously search for any remains. As far as remains go, we certainly didn't find anything, or we'd be having a very different conversation. But there were things that, again, in that speculation point of view, not necessarily factual, but one could hypothesize that it may lead somewhere, I guess.
And then I guess the protocol would be for you to turn that information and those photos over to the police. Is that kind of standard procedure?
Yeah, so we typically write a report for all of our missing persons cases, and it's not necessarily for the for the families. It's more for law enforcement, because there is a series of events that law enforcement in Australia needs to go through, and one of those is to report sort of status of the case or facts to the coroner, who's able to then make recommendations as to what happens next. And some of those things can be quite mechanical, jump over this hoop and then you can do this next thing. So by being able to satisfy certain steps for the police, it allows them to do things like access additional funding for different search types, for example, if they've exhausted maybe the initial types of searches that they would do. And so one of our goals sort of when helping the families to also empower either other searchers or the police to continue to move the case on. So sometimes it's not necessarily about finding the person, so to speak, whilst that would be great. A lot of the times it's also about ruling out things or moving the case along from the police perspective, or helping the family just to tick something off the list that they've been, meaning to do. Because sometimes these missing persons cases can drive the families, to despair. They really, really struggle with it, for obvious reasons.
Yeah, that's got to be tough. And so are you going to continue searching for James, or you've kind of done what you can do and now it's, you've done the report and everything else and it's up to kind of the police and other investigators to take charge of this and hopefully gain some traction? So
we don't really stop, I guess. So once we're familiar with the case, we will keep assisting. But the question with James in particular is where next? We've done Mendooran, which is sort of the key location. And we are confined to, like I mentioned, sort of a 50 square kilometre area. So when you consider just Mendooran to Lightning Ridge is, it's probably 400 or 500 kilometres. We can't do a lot of that. So the answer to the question is slightly vague. If we get information that leads us to assist the police or the family in a different location, then certainly we would assist. The question is, where do you go from here? That's really the question.
And that kind of ties into my last question, which, probably leading you a little bit with this one based on your last answer. But it seems like really then the best way for anyone listening who's in the area or may have seen James, like just come forward with information like that would just be beneficial to everyone involved at this point, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's right. And it can be really innocuous information. It doesn't have to be, you saw something in particular that led, and not just in James's case, but in any missing person's case. Because when we do the exercise of that speculative search techniques, we feed in all sorts of random ideas. So if someone comes up with, their own hypothesis that, they saw him at a particular point in time and they've got a certain tip and we can feed that in, then it allows us to tick off more of those speculative searches. And particularly for the police, where they may have information that they certainly wouldn't share with me, but it can help change the direction of the case as well. And so, yeah, anything is certainly worth reporting.
If you have any information about James's disappearance, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem, please get in touch with the Dubbo Police Station at 02-6883-1599. Or you can call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-333-000. Your help could be the key to finding James. If you can spare some time, please consider assisting James's family in combing through the drone images which are now online. If you want to help financially, you can also donate to the GoFundMe page, which I've linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support the podcast, you can sign up for Patreon for as little as $5 a month, where you'll get ad and sponsor-free episodes, updates on the pod, and early access to all content. If Patreon isn't your thing, you can also buy me a coffee. Both are linked in the show notes. Please follow the pod on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, which are also linked in the description. Also, please feel free to leave me a 5-star review where you're listening right now. Thanks for listening to the Missing and Unexplained podcast.